Playdate fans, it's been a while, but we have not forgotten about you. If anything, 2024 has so far made me appreciate exactly why the Playdate just works. It's a handheld that demands games rely on novel gameplay ideas or unique storytelling rather than realistic graphics or complex mechanics. It's a monument to the philosophy that simple doesn't have to mean simplistic. Its catalog is hardly all indie gems though, with some experiences being way too basic or derivative to really catch my attention or recommend. And with so little media attention on these games, it can be hard to know which are worth your time and which will get boring after just a few minutes. So, I'm here to help you with that, by giving you my personal list of 10 Playdate games you should not miss from the first half of 2024. Before I do, as always, if you like our content, please remember to like and subscribe, as well as consider checking out our Patreon. And join us Tuesdays and Thursdays either here on YouTube or over on our Twitch channel to watch us streaming some of the latest and greatest indies. Let's start, in no particular order I should say, with Medial, an unlikely marriage of Minesweeper and Sudoku that has worked out spectacularly, despite some family drama at the wedding. Medial is a puzzle game where each level takes place on a 5x5 grid in which every row and column must include 3 shapes: a triangle, a circle, and a hexagon. Where in the grid these shapes are actually placed is determined by both numbers within the grid that tell you how many shapes surround them, Minesweeper style, and medial hints at the end of some rows and columns which tell you which is the middle shape in the corresponding set. The game allows you to fill each square in the grid with either one of the 3 shapes, an X indicating that no shape should go there, or a star indicating that some shape should go there but you're not yet sure quite which. It's brilliantly simple in theory but devious in execution, especially once you move on from its simpler levels. I had a great time with Medial, and for $2 it's not only one of the best games currently on Playdate, but one of the cheapest as well. My next pick is a simple but exceedingly charming score chaser that adapts Simon Says to the Playdate's unique control scheme. In each level, you have to memorize your lines for a play, which exist in the form of actions you need to take on the Playdate itself, like pressing A or removing the crank from its holster. It starts off easy enough, but each successful performance will add a direction to the mix until you're committing dozens of motions to memory and manipulating your Playdate like a chimp trying to learn computer engineering. It's fun, it's challenging, and the cute on-stage scene animations add a lot of life to each run. Anybody into a charming memory game with a cute presentation should definitely be giving this one a look. Next up is an arguably obvious one to those who have been following the Playdate scene, but still probably the single best game on the device thus far. I'm talking about Mars After Midnight, the Playdate exclusive title by none other than indie developer legend Lucas Pope, creator of Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn. Mars After Midnight sees Pope returning to a framework similar to Papers, Please, but with some unique new mechanics and tongue planted firmly in cheek this time. Each session in Mars After Midnight will have you working at the Off-Colony Community Support Center, a late-night therapy group of sorts for Martians with a variety of issues. You'll begin by advertising the group itself in the right areas around the colony, picking which refreshments to serve that evening, and then acting as a bouncer of sorts to ensure only Martians relevant to the group in question are allowed in. Maybe one night you'll be running a group for aliens that flinch at loud noises, so the way you figure out who's legit is by blowing a horn in everyone's face and seeing how they react. As each alien heads to the group, they'll take part in the refreshments on offer, and you will have to clean up after them accordingly until somebody new knocks. It's a really charming gameplay loop with a fantastic presentation to boot, and at $6 for a few hours of gameplay, Mars After Midnight is not only one of my personal favorite games on Playdate, but one of the best values you can currently get on it. If you own a Playdate, I would say Mars After Midnight is an absolutely essential purchase. Next on the list is a really interesting take on tower defense. I won't lie, it's graphically pretty unremarkable, but underneath its utilitarian exterior lies a strategically interesting title that requires you to use a limited number of funds to place defenses in the orbits of each level's planets. Your defenses will orbit at whatever pace the planet's size dictates, so Whether you use the correct sort of defenses or not, incorrect placement of them might result in an enemy skirting by your defenses just as they're on the wrong end of the orbit. Meanwhile, clustering your defense turrets on a small, quickly orbiting planet might result in them not being able to reach particular enemies, and allowing them to fly by at the last possible moment. I've never seen a tower defense game make your defenses move like this in such a way that requires you to think a few steps ahead and carefully intervene if things are going south. If you have interest in a unique take on the genre, definitely check Satolite out. Now, let's take a look at a game with a weird name that certainly rolls off the tongue. This is Deep Space Dapper Squad, a top-down space shooter with roguelike elements. Deep Space Dapper Squad, which I dare you to say 10 times fast, has satisfying shooting elements and a great presentation, but my favorite part is probably the level of stressful multitasking it requires in order to manage your energy. Shooting at enemies will eat up energy, and when your energy meter depletes, so does your ability to shoot. Charging it back up is as easy as turning the crank a handful of times, but this requires you to take your hands off the controls and be just a little too vulnerable if you don't plan to charge at regular intervals in advance. It's easy in theory, but the more madness pops up on screen, the more difficult it is to find a period of rest to recharge before your run goes haywire. With tons of different unlockable ships to try out, Deep Space Dapper Squad is a damn good time and definitely worth checking out if you're into a frantic space shooter with lots of charm. My next pick is an absolute gem and has one of my favorite presentations of any game on Playdate. Escape the Arcade starts as you're magically and mysteriously transported inside of an arcade prize claw machine and need to solve a variety of puzzles to find your way out. These run the gamut from identifying which shapes to form a key into that will unlock an exit, matching pieces of photos up together, or using letters hidden in some intricately drawn scenery to guess a password. And what they all have in common is being gorgeous to look at and being backed by some really fun tunes. Passion absolutely oozes from this project, and its story is especially fun to follow along with when you're tasked with using the crank to physically scroll through its various scenes. I thought Escape the Arcade was a great time and really look forward to seeing what its developer does next. Disco Elysium fans may want to pay attention to this one. Heist of the Argonaut Limited is a story-focused RPG about a criminal trying to rob a train, and its emphasis on story-altering decisions based on dice rolls as opposed to any sort of combat really makes it feel like Disco Elysium's small but scrappy little brother. Look, I won't pretend the writing is quite up to that standard. No game's writing is, really, in my opinion. But the ability to choose your starting stats and then have them apply to your dice rolls adds just enough variation between character builds that it feels like everything you do matters. Focusing your stats on bronze over brains, for example, might add 5 points to every roll of the 20-sided dice to ensure physical confrontations are more likely to be successful. Conversely, some of your stats can go negative if you really want to let them, thus allowing your dice rolls for those stats to be biased against you. It's also a pretty funny game with some hilarious fourth wall breaks and a facetious tone that frequently made me smile. You'll be having a normal conversation and will get a maniacal option to randomly attack the person who's talking to you if you get a strength roll of 20, and have the game react accordingly if you succeed. RPG fans on Playdate who want something a little different, make sure to give Heist of the Argonaut Limited a look. My next pick is not only a fun game to play, but a fun name to say. This is Jolly Chimp Champ, and if you choose to say it 10 times fast around other people, just make sure you're ready to be involuntarily committed. Jolly Chimp Champ requires you to use the Playdate's crank to navigate one jolly, cymbal-clapping chimp across a series of conveyor belts, often cleverly navigating obstacles along your way. I honestly adore just how easy this one is to pick up, and the developers have gotten astounding mileage out of a game that really just requires the crank. Levels are cleverly oriented to be tricky, and having 100 of them to play makes the price tag of $6 perfectly reasonable to me. I never thought I'd play a game that's Slay the Spire meets Cryptmaster meets Scrabble, mostly because, well, that's way too specific for me to ever expect that exact thing to be made. But it's a perfect fit for the Playdate. Rendsword is entirely focused on its battle system, which has you use Scrabble tiles to form words whose total point value will be the damage you deal to your enemies. But wait, there's more! Each enemy will have a specific tile associated with them that you must use in your word if you want to deal damage to that enemy. So, do you want to focus all your might on the spider who gets damaged by words with the letter C if you have a particularly good one in mind? Or can you incorporate the letter R in there to damage the bat next to them at the same time? I love the strategic possibilities here and have never played a game that mixes these ideas in quite this same way. Also, the soundtrack slaps. Enough said. I won't pretend my last pick for this list will be for everyone because it is pretty basic and arguably a little frustrating in the lack of guidance it gives. But if you give it some time, you might find it as satisfying as I did. SCP-038813 is, as you might have guessed, you clever little minx, based on one of the most fascinating collaborative writing projects the internet has ever birthed, which I highly recommend looking up if you've never heard of it. Let's not mince words here. As a lover of cosmic horror, I simp hard for anything SCP related. And while SCP-038813 does not add much to the SCP lore, nor does its title roll off the tongue quite like the other games in this list, it does turn some of the more interesting SCP entries into decryption puzzles, which is pretty cool. Each level, the game will task you to decrypt the log of an anomaly by using the crank to scroll between letters until you settle on one that seems right. There's not much guidance here, and context clues, especially the acronym SCP itself, will certainly be your best friend in getting the decryption ball rolling. But the game does its best to ease frustration by providing gentle visual cues when you're on the right path and making the scroll through each letter tactile and satisfying. It may help to be a current or prospective fan of SCP to really get the most out of this one, but I suspect a lot of people will enjoy what's on offer here as much as I did. And there we have it. Not a bad opening to 2024 at all in my opinion, with some real standout titles and a sense that the Playdate's catalog is coming into a life of its own after a couple relatively slow years getting the ball rolling. I am more excited now than ever before about what's in store for the Playdate's future. I hope you enjoyed today's picks, and let me know in the comments below if you think there are other titles I didn't mention here that you think are worth a shout out. Until next time, Playdate fans, keep cranking away at that Playdate catalog, and keep it here at I Dream of Indie Games for the best and brightest indies that gaming media's echo chambers are too afraid to cover.